The whisper of scandal followed Violet Kensington like a shadow as she stepped off the train in Platteville, Colorado, clutching her worn carpetbag with white knuckles. The spring of 1876 brought no fresh starts for a woman with her reputation, only the weight of judgment that had chased her from St. Louis all the way to this dusty frontier town nestled at the base of the Rocky Mountains. The station was little more than a wooden platform with a small office attached. Violet straightened her plain blue traveling dress, conscious of the curious stares from the handful of people waiting for the eastbound train. Even here, hundreds of miles from where her life had fallen apart, she could feel the familiar chill of disapproval. "Miss Kensington." A stern-faced woman approached, squinting at her through wire-rimmed spectacles. "I'm Mrs. Whittaker. I've been expecting you." Violet nodded, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you for meeting me and for the teaching position." Mrs. Whittaker's thin lips pressed together. "My brother vouched for your qualifications, though he was vague about your circumstances in St. Louis. I trust there will be no issues here." The implication was clear. Violet swallowed hard. "None whatsoever. I'm grateful for the opportunity." Mrs. Whittaker turned and began walking. "The schoolhouse is just past the main street. You'll be staying in the room above it. Platteville may be small, but we expect certain standards from our teacher." Violet followed, acutely aware of how the townspeople paused in their activities to watch her pass. Within hours, she knew, the rumors would start. They always did. Main Street consisted of the essential businesses of any frontier town: general store, saloon, blacksmith, and a small hotel. The recently built church stood proudly at one end, its white steeple reaching toward the endless Colorado sky. At the other end sat the schoolhouse, a simple one-room building with a bell tower. "School begins Monday. 23 children, ages 6 to 15. Mrs. Whittaker unlocked the door and gestured inside. The previous teacher left rather abruptly when she married a prospector heading to the San Juans. The schoolroom was tidy but sparse: rows of benches facing a larger desk, a blackboard on the wall, and a small stove in the corner. A narrow staircase led to what would be Violet's new home. "I'll leave you to settle in," Mrs. Whittaker said. "The general store closes at 6 if you need supplies." She hesitated at the door. "Miss Kensington, Platteville is a respectable town. We don't tolerate impropriety." After she left, Violet sank onto the teacher's chair, fighting back tears. She'd come so far hoping to escape her past, but the burden of secrets was not so easily shed. At 24, she felt decades older, worn down by the weight of a scandal not entirely of her making. She climbed the stairs to inspect her new quarters: a small room with a bed, dresser, washstand, and a window overlooking the street. Simple, but her own. Perhaps here she could rebuild what remained of her life. The sound of horses outside drew her to the window. A group of cowboys rode down the street, dust billowing around them as they headed toward the saloon. Among them, one man stood out tall and broad-shouldered on a magnificent chestnut stallion. Unlike his companions, he didn't immediately dismount at the saloon but continued past, glancing up at her window as he rode by. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Violet stepped back quickly, her heart racing unexpectedly. She had not come to Platteville for anything but escape and redemption. Men, especially rugged cowboys, were a complication she could not afford. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Violet unpacked her meager possessions. Among them was a small photograph, creased and worn from frequent handling. She tucked it into the drawer of her bedside table, face down. Some memories were better left buried. Tomorrow she would begin again. Tonight she would allow herself one last night of mourning for everything she had lost. Finn Xavier pulled his hat lower against the afternoon sun as he guided his horse through the bustling Saturday crowd on Platteville's Main Street. The town had grown considerably since he'd first arrived 5 years ago, fresh from the war and looking for somewhere to forget. Now, at 32, he'd built a respectable ranching operation northwest of town, the Broken Spur, with enough cattle and horses to keep him comfortable if not wealthy. "Xavier," Sheriff Mills called from outside his office. "Heard you brought in that stray herd from up near Carr Creek." Finn dismounted, tying his horse to the hitching post. "Found about 20 head with mixed brands. Figured I'd bring them in before the rustlers got to them." "Good man." Sheriff Mills chewed on his ever-present toothpick. "Say, you hear we got a new school teacher?" "Arrived yesterday on the afternoon train." "That's so," Finn replied, trying to sound disinterested while recalling the woman he'd glimpsed at the schoolhouse window. Something about her had caught his attention, a sadness perhaps, or a wariness that resonated with his own. Mrs. Whitaker's mighty tight-lipped about her, which has set tongues wagging. The sheriff lowered his voice. "Word is she left St. Louis under some kind of cloud." Finn frowned. "People ought to mind their own business. In a town this size, you know better." The sheriff shrugged. "Though I reckon everyone deserves a fresh start." After leaving the sheriff, Finn completed his errand supplies at the general store, a letter posted to his sister back east, and arrangements with the blacksmith for new shoes for his horses. He was heading back to his mount when he spotted her, the new teacher, emerging from the mercantile with a basket of goods. Up close, she was even more striking than the glimpse he'd caught yesterday. Chestnut hair pinned neatly beneath a modest bonnet, pale skin that spoke of indoor work rather than frontier life, and eyes, when she glanced his way, of the deepest green he'd ever seen. But it was the way she carried herself that truly caught his attention, straight-backed and dignified despite the whispers that followed her down the street. As she approached, a group of women outside the milliner's shop fell silent, watching her pass with undisguised judgment. Finn saw the teacher's shoulders stiffen, her pace quicken almost imperceptibly. Just as she passed him, her basket caught on a loose board in the walkway. The contents: paper, pencils, an apple, and a small book scattered across the dusty street. Finn moved without thinking, stepping forward to help. "Allow me, madam." She looked startled by his assistance, those remarkable green eyes widening. "Thank you, but I can manage. No trouble at all." He gathered the fallen items, noting the title of the book, a collection of Shakespeare's sonnets, not typical frontier reading. "I'm Finn Xavier. Own the Broken Spur Ranch outside town. Violet, Kensington." She accepted the basket from him with careful hands, maintaining a proper distance. The new teacher. "Welcome to Platteville, Miss Kensington." He tipped his hat. "Don't let the gossips trouble you. They'll find something new to chatter about soon enough." A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, or wariness, crossed her face. "I'm quite accustomed to being discussed, Mr. Xavier, but thank you for your concern." Before he could respond, Mrs. Whitaker emerged from the milliner's shop. "Miss Kensington, I see you've met Mr. Xavier." Her tone carried an unmistakable warning. "Just helping the lady with a fallen basket," Finn said easily, stepping back. "How gallant." Mrs. Whitaker's voice dripped with disapproval. "Come along, Miss Kensington. We have the curriculum to discuss before Monday." As Violet was led away, she glanced back once. For the briefest moment, Finn thought he saw a flash of something beyond the careful composure, a longing, perhaps, for connection in a town determined to keep her at arm's length. Finn watched them go, intrigued despite himself. He'd spent 5 years avoiding entanglements in Platteville, focusing on building his ranch and keeping his own troubled past at bay. He had no business being interested in the new schoolteacher, especially one already marked by the town's disapproval. Yet as he mounted his horse and headed back toward the broken spur, he found himself thinking of green eyes and Shakespeare sonnets, and wondering what secrets Violet Kensington might be hiding. The first day of school arrived with clear skies and mild spring temperatures. Violet stood at the schoolhouse door, welcoming her students with what she hoped was an authoritative yet warm smile. Their curious faces reflected various degrees of interest and suspicion. The children of Platteville had clearly heard their parents' whispers. "Good morning," she said once they were seated. "I am Miss Kensington, and I will be your teacher. We have much to learn together." A boy of about 12 raised his hand. "Miss Kensington, my pa says you're from back east. Is that why you talk so fancy?" Several children giggled. Violet maintained her composure. "I was born in Philadelphia and most recently lived in St. Louis. And yes, different regions have different ways of speaking. Perhaps we'll study that in our geography lessons." The morning progressed more smoothly than she'd feared. The children, whatever they'd heard at home, seemed willing enough to give her a chance. By lunchtime, Violet felt cautiously optimistic about her new position. That optimism dimmed when she stepped outside to supervise the lunch hour and found herself face to face with Lydia Mercer, wife of the town banker, and according to Mrs. Whittaker's introductions the previous day, the unofficial leader of Platteville society. "Miss Kensington." Mrs. Mercer's smile didn't reach her eyes. "How are you finding our little town?" "Quite pleasant, thank you." Violet maintained her professional demeanor despite the chill in the other woman's voice. "I must say, we were all quite surprised when Mrs. Whittaker hired a teacher sight unseen on her brother's recommendation." Mrs. Mercer's gaze swept over Violet assessingly, especially one with such vague references. "I assure you my qualifications are thorough," Violet replied, keeping her voice steady. "I graduated from the normal school in St. Louis and taught for 3 years." "Yes, but you left rather suddenly, didn't you?" Mrs. Mercer's smile sharpened. "One does wonder why." Before Violet could respond, a deep voice interrupted. "Mrs. Mercer, good day to you." Finn Xavier approached on horseback, his presence an unexpected reprieve. He tipped his hat to both women, but his eyes lingered on Violet. "Mr. Xavier." Mrs. Mercer's tone warmed considerably. "What brings you to town on a Monday?" "Delivering some books for the school." He dismounted, retrieving a package from his saddlebag. "Found these in Denver last month and thought they might be useful. Primer on natural sciences and some maps of the territories." Violet accepted the package with surprise. "This is most generous, Mr. Xavier." "Education matters out here, Miss Kensington. These children deserve every advantage." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Even those of us who spend more time with cattle than conversation benefit from knowing our letters." Mrs. Mercer watched this exchange with narrowed eyes. "How thoughtful of you, Mr. Xavier. Though I wonder if Miss Kensington is planning to stay long enough to make use of them." The barb was not subtle. Violet felt her cheeks warm but maintained her dignity. "I have every intention of fulfilling my contract, Mrs. Mercer." "Well," the older woman sniffed, "I should be going. The church committee meets this afternoon to discuss the spring social." She paused meaningfully. "It's quite selective, you understand." After she departed, Violet released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Don't let her rattle you," Finn said quietly. "Lydia Mercer considers herself the gatekeeper of Platteville society, but her opinion isn't shared by everyone." "Thank you for the books," Violet said, changing the subject. "They'll be very useful." "I meant what I said about education." His expression turned serious. "Most of these children won't go beyond what you teach them. What they learn here might determine the course of their lives." Something in his voice suggested personal experience. Violet found herself wondering about Finn Xavier's past, even as she reminded herself to maintain appropriate distance. "The children seem bright and willing," she offered, "though I suspect some parents may object to having their children taught by." She trailed off, unwilling to voice the town's judgment of her. "By someone they know nothing about," Finn suggested diplomatically. "Give them time." Actions speak louder than gossip. The school bell rang, signaling the end of the lunch period. Children began streaming back toward the schoolhouse. "I should go," Violet said. "Thank you again for the books, Mr. Xavier." He nodded, remounting his horse with the easy grace of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. "Miss Kensington," he paused. "Platteville isn't always quick to welcome strangers, but it can be a good place once you find your footing." As he rode away, Violet wondered if she would ever truly find her footing again, or if the weight of the past would always keep her slightly off balance, forever the outsider looking in. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm. Each morning, Violet rang the school bell promptly at 8 o'clock. The children arrived, some eager, some reluctant, and she guided them through reading, arithmetic, geography, and history. At 4, they departed in a flurry of books and chatter, leaving her to prepare for the next day's lessons. Sundays brought church services, where Violet sat alone in the back pew, enduring the curious glances and whispered comments. Pastor Johnson, at least, had been welcoming, though his wife clearly shared Mrs. Mercer's reservations about the new teacher. April turned to May, and the wildflowers bloomed across the prairies surrounding Platteville. Violet found unexpected joy in her work. Whatever the adults thought of her, the children had largely accepted her, especially after she introduced Friday afternoon nature walks and started a small school garden. She saw Finn Xavier occasionally at church, or when he came to town for supplies. Each time, he tipped his hat and offered a kind word, sometimes stopping to ask about the school or mention a book he thought she might enjoy. These brief interactions became bright spots in her carefully circumscribed existence. One Wednesday afternoon, as the children filed out, she noticed Tommy Jenkins, one of her youngest students, lingering by the door. "Tommy, is something wrong?" The 7-year-old twisted his cap in his hands. "Miss Kensington, my ma wants to know if you'd come to dinner on Friday. Pa's birthday is Saturday, and she's making a special supper." Violet blinked in surprise. This was the first social invitation she'd received since arriving in Platteville. "I'd be honored, Tommy. Please tell your mother thank you," the boy grinned. "Ma says 6 o'clock. We're out past Miller's Creek, the farm with the big red barn." After he left, Violet sat at her desk, emotions warring within her. Martha Jenkins had always been kind during their brief interactions, but an invitation to her home was unexpected. Perhaps the walls of isolation were beginning to crumble. Friday evening arrived clear and mild. Violet changed into her best dress, a dark blue cotton with subtle embroidery at the collar and cuffs, and pinned her hair in a simple but flattering style. She'd barely had occasion to wear anything but her work clothes since arriving in Platteville. The Jenkins farm was a 30-minute walk from town. As Violet approached, she could see it was a prosperous homestead, well-maintained buildings, healthy livestock, and fields green with spring crops. The house itself was modest but solid, with cheerful curtains in the windows and a porch swing moving gently in the evening breeze. Before she could knock, the door swung open. Martha Jenkins, flour dusting her apron, smiled warmly. "Miss Kensington, we're so glad you could come. Please come in." The house smelled of roasting meat and freshly baked bread. In the main room, several people were already gathered. Violet recognized Elijah Jenkins and their 3 children, but froze when she saw the other guest. Finn Xavier stood by the fireplace, deep in conversation with Elijah. He looked different out of his usual ranch clothes, still rugged but more polished in a clean shirt and vest, his dark hair neatly combed. He looked up as she entered, surprise flickering in his blue eyes before he smiled. "Miss Kensington, Mr. Xavier?" She nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "I didn't realize you would be joining us." "Finn's practically family," Martha explained, taking Violet's shawl. "His ranch borders our land, and he's been a godsend helping with the heavy work since Elijah's accident last year." "Broke my leg falling off the barn roof," Elijah explained cheerfully. "Finn kept our place running until I healed. We'd have lost the farm without him." Dinner was served at the large kitchen table, pot roast with vegetables from Martha's root cellar, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. The conversation flowed easily, centered mostly on farming, local news, and the children's progress at school. "Miss Kensington has Tommy reading better than I ever managed," Martha said proudly. "And Sarah's arithmetic has improved so much." "Your children are a pleasure to teach," Violet replied sincerely. "They're bright and eager to learn." "Not like their father," Elijah joked. "I barely made it through 3 readers before I was done with schooling." "But you're the best farmer in 3 counties," Finn countered. "And you can calculate crop yields and profit margins faster than any banker." As the evening progressed, Violet found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't since before the scandal in St. Louis. Here, in this warm farmhouse, she wasn't damaged goods, but simply the schoolteacher who was helping the Jenkins children thrive. After dinner, while Martha and the children cleared the table, Elijah pulled out a fiddle. "How about some music to celebrate my almost birthday?" He played skillfully, foot tapping against the wooden floor as he launched into a lively reel. Martha and the children clapped along, and soon the furniture was pushed back to create a small dance space. "Miss Kensington," Tommy approached with boyish formality, "would you dance with me?" Violet laughed and took his hands, showing him the simple steps as they moved around the room. After one dance, Sarah cut in, wanting her turn with the teacher. When the music shifted to a slower waltz, Finn approached. "May I?" he asked quietly. Violet hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused against hers as he led her into the dance, maintaining a respectable distance between them while still guiding her confidently. "You dance well for a cattleman," she observed. A smile tugged at his mouth. "I wasn't always a rancher. My mother insisted all her children learn proper social graces. You have siblings," a sister in Boston, married to a professor. His eyes held a hint of reminiscence. "She writes regularly, trying to convince me to sell the ranch and return to civilization." "But you prefer the frontier." "I prefer honest work and open spaces." His gaze met hers directly. "And second chances." The words hung between them, laden with meaning. Violet looked away first. "The Jenkins family seems quite fond of you," she said, changing the subject. "Good people. They took me in when I first arrived in Colorado, barely knowing which end of a cow was which." His expression softened. "Not everyone in Platteville is as quick to judge as Lydia Mercer and her circle." As the dance ended, Violet became aware of Martha watching them with undisguised interest. She stepped back, putting proper distance between herself and Finn. "It's growing late," she said. "I should return to town before full dark." "I'll escort you," Finn offered immediately. "That's not necessary, I insist." His tone was gentle but firm. "It's 3 miles back to town." Martha settled the matter by handing Violet her shawl. "Of course Finn will see you safely home. These roads can be tricky after sunset, even in good weather." After warm goodbyes and promises to visit again, Violet found herself walking beside Finn in the gathering twilight. His horse followed behind, reins loosely held in his hand. "The Jenkins are good people," Violet said after a comfortable silence. "I'm glad Tommy invited me. Martha's been singing your praises since you started teaching. She never had much schooling herself and wants better for her children." They walked a little further, the only sounds their footsteps and the occasional snort from Finn's horse. "Miss Kensington," Finn finally said, "I hope you don't mind my asking, but what brought you to Platteville? It's not exactly on the main route west." Violet tensed. A teaching position was available. There are teaching positions in many places, including larger towns with more amenities. His voice remained conversational, not prying. "Platteville is rather remote for someone used to city life. Perhaps I wanted remote." She looked ahead at the road, dimly visible in the fading light. Sometimes distance is necessary. Finn was quiet for several steps. "I understand that better than most." He glanced at her. "When I came to Colorado, I was running too, not from scandal but from memories. The war left scars that didn't show on the outside." His honesty caught her off guard. "You fought in the war, Union cavalry, 4 years that felt like 40. He looked up at the emerging stars. "When it ended, I couldn't go back to my old life. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt right anymore." Violet felt an unexpected kinship with this man who understood what it meant to leave everything behind and start again. Did it help, coming west, eventually? His smile was barely visible in the gathering darkness. "The work helps honest labor that leaves you too tired to dwell on the past, and finding people who judge you by what you do now, not what happened before." They crested a small rise, and Platteville came into view, lights twinkling in the valley below. Violet paused, struck by the beauty of the scene. The small frontier town nestled against the backdrop of mountains, stars appearing one by one in the deepening blue of the sky. "It is beautiful here," she admitted softly. "Yes," Finn agreed, though when she glanced at him, he wasn't looking at the view but at her. The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged with unspoken possibilities. Violet broke it first, continuing down the path toward town. "Thank you for escorting me, Mr. Xavier," she said as they reached the schoolhouse. "It was unnecessary but kind." "Finn," he corrected gently. "After sharing the Jenkins table and dancing to Elijah's fiddle, I think we can dispense with formalities, at least in private." Violet hesitated. Friendship with this man or anything more would only complicate her precarious position in Platteville. Yet she found herself saying, "Then you must call me Violet, though perhaps not in front of the townspeople. Their opinions matter a great deal to you." "They matter to my continued employment," she corrected. "Mrs. Whittaker made it very clear that my behavior must be beyond reproach." Finn nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then I'll be Mr. Xavier in public and Finn only when we're among friends like the Jenkins family." He tipped his hat. "Good night, Violet. Sleep well." She watched him mount his horse and ride away, a silhouette against the star-filled sky. For the first time since arriving in Platteville, Violet felt something like hope, not just for survival, but for the possibility of genuine connection. As spring turned to summer, Platteville thrived under clear skies and gentle rains. Crops flourished in the surrounding farmlands, and the ranches reported healthy calving seasons. In town, the mood was optimistic, with talk of expanding the mercantile and possibly adding a proper doctor's office by year's end. For Violet, the passing weeks brought gradual acceptance from some quarters of the community. Her students' academic progress spoke for itself, and parents like Martha Jenkins weren't shy about praising the new teacher's methods. She became a regular dinner guest at the Jenkins farm, occasionally crossing paths with Finn there, their friendship growing despite her careful maintenance of propriety. One sweltering July afternoon, As Violet was tending the school garden after dismissing her students, she looked up to see Finn approaching on foot, leading his horse. "Good afternoon," he called. "Productive gardening." Violet brushed soil from her hands. "The children planted vegetables in May. We're starting to harvest radishes and lettuce. Teaching them practical skills alongside book learning. Wise approach." He glanced at the neat rows of plants. "Though I suspect this garden gets extra attention after school hours." "Perhaps," she admitted with a small smile. "I find gardening soothing." Finn nodded toward his saddlebags. "I brought something from Denver. New books for your classroom," and he hesitated. "Something I thought you might enjoy personally." He withdrew a package wrapped in brown paper. Curious, Violet unwrapped it to find a beautifully bound collection of poetry by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. She opened it gently, running her fingers over the title page. "This is lovely," she said softly, "but I can't accept such a personal gift." "It's not a new book," Finn explained. "It belonged to my mother. I found it among my things and remembered how you mentioned admiring Browning's work. The fact that he'd remembered a passing comment from months ago touched her deeply. In that case, I'll treasure it, thank you." "I was hoping you might read some aloud sometime," he said, a hint of vulnerability in his request. "My education was interrupted by the war, and I've always enjoyed hearing poetry more than reading it myself." Before Violet could respond, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Miss Kensington." Mrs. Whittaker marched toward them, disapproval radiating from every line of her rigid frame. "I was not aware you entertained gentlemen callers at the schoolhouse." "Mr. Xavier was just delivering some educational materials," Violet explained, instinctively stepping away from Finn and clutching the book to her chest. "Indeed." Mrs. Whittaker's gaze flicked to the volume in Violet's hands, then back to her face. "May I remind you that your contract stipulates the utmost propriety at all times. The school board would take a very dim view of inappropriate associations." Finn straightened, his expression hardening. "Mrs. Whittaker, there's nothing improper about bringing books to the school. Miss Kensington is an excellent teacher who has earned the respect of her students and their parents." "The respect of parents like the Jenkins, perhaps," Mrs. Whittaker sniffed. "But more influential families have expressed concerns about Miss Kensington's background and character. The Mercers, for instance, are questioning whether she provides an appropriate moral example for impressionable children." Violet felt the familiar cold weight of judgment settling over her. "I assure you, Mrs. Whittaker, my behavior has been entirely professional. See that it remains so." The older woman's eyes narrowed. "Remember, Miss Kensington, second chances are rare. I would hate to inform my brother that his recommendation was misplaced." After Mrs. Whittaker left, Violet released a shaky breath. "I'm sorry you witnessed that." "I'm the one who should apologize," Finn said, genuine regret in his voice. "I didn't think about how my visit might appear." "It's not your fault. Mrs. Whittaker and her friends have been looking for reasons to find me unsuitable since I arrived." Violet carefully wrapped the book and handed it back to him. "Perhaps you should keep this for now." He shook his head, gently pushing it back toward her. "Keep it, just be discreet." His expression turned serious. "Violet, whatever happened in St. Louis, please don't." She stepped back, her voice low but firm. "What happened there is in the past. I came to Platteville for a fresh start, and you deserve one." Finn held her gaze steadily. "Everyone does, but secrets have a way of surfacing, especially in small towns. If you ever need someone to listen without judgment, I hope you'll consider me a friend." The sincerity in his offer moved her, but Violet maintained her distance. "Thank you, but I should finish here before someone else sees us together." Finn nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'll be at the Jenkins farm on Sunday. Elijah and I are fixing their barn roof." He mounted his horse. "Good day, Miss Kensington." As he rode away, Violet clutched the book to her chest, aware she was treading a dangerous line. Her position in Platteville remained precarious, her reputation balanced on the knife edge of propriety. Yet the thought of returning the book, of severing this tentative connection with Finn, filled her with unexpected sadness. That night, as she sat in her small room above the schoolhouse, Violet opened the poetry book. A pressed wildflower fell from between its pages, a delicate purple columbine, Colorado's state flower. No note accompanied it, but the message was clear enough. Violet carefully returned the flower to its place between the pages of Sonnets from the Portuguese, and read by lamplight until long past midnight, finding in Browning's words an echo of emotions she dared not acknowledge even to herself. The town's annual Founders' Day celebration arrived in early August, bringing with it a rare holiday from school and the largest social gathering of the year. Main Street was decorated with bunting, and tables lined the space between the church and Mercantile, laden with food prepared by the women of Platteville. Violet had volunteered to help with the children's games, hoping that active participation in the community event might further improve her standing. She stood beneath a canvas awning, organizing sack races and egg and spoon relays while trying to ignore the speculative glances still directed her way. "You've got those children better organized than a military drill," came a familiar voice. Finn stood nearby, more formally dressed than usual in a clean white shirt and dark vest. He'd even polished his boots for the occasion. "They're enjoying themselves," Violet replied, conscious of watching eyes. "The competition is quite fierce." "Miss Kensington," Tommy Jenkins called. "Is it time for the three-legged race?" "Indeed it is," she answered, grateful for the distraction. "Find your partners, everyone." As she helped pair the children and tie their legs together with strips of cloth, she was aware of Finn watching her, his expression warm. She'd seen little of him since the incident with Mrs. Whittaker, their paths crossing only briefly at church or in passing on Main Street. The races occupied the afternoon, followed by a community dinner at the long tables. Violet found herself seated with the Jenkins family, Finn across from her. The conversation flowed easily around them, talk of harvests and weather, local news and plans for the coming winter. "Miss Kensington, will you judge the pie contest?" Martha asked as they finished eating. "We need someone impartial, and you've got a refined palate." Before Violet could answer, Lydia Mercer approached their table, her husband the banker in tow. "Actually," Mrs. Mercer said smoothly, "the committee has already selected Pastor Johnson's wife to judge the pies. Much more appropriate, wouldn't you agree?" The implied slight was obvious. Violet forced a smile. "Mrs. Johnson will do an excellent job, I'm sure." "Indeed." Mrs. Mercer's gaze swept over Violet critically. "Though we are pleased you could join our celebration, Miss Kensington, so brave of you to participate so publicly." Finn set down his fork with deliberate care. "Miss Kensington has organized the most successful children's activities we've had in years, Mrs. Mercer. The town is fortunate to have her." Mrs. Mercer's smile tightened. "Mr. Xavier, always the champion of lost causes. First those poor Jenkins when Elijah had his accident, and now our controversial schoolteacher." She turned to Violet. "Though I suppose teaching is a suitable occupation for a woman in your position, limited options and all that." Martha Jenkins gasped softly at the rudeness, but before anyone could respond, the band struck up a lively tune, announcing the beginning of the dancing. "Excuse me," Violet said, rising with as much dignity as she could muster. "I should help clear the tables." She escaped to the far end of the gathering, busying herself with collecting plates and trying to calm her racing heart. The humiliation burned, made worse by having occurred in front of Finn and the Jenkins family. "Don't let her win," came Finn's voice as he appeared beside her, taking a stack of plates from her trembling hands. "I don't know what you mean," Violet said stiffly. "Yes, you do." His voice was low, meant only for her. "Lydia Mercer wants you to hide away in shame. Don't give her the satisfaction." "Mr. Xavier, dance with me," he interrupted. Violet looked up at him in shock. That would only make matters worse. One dance in full view of everyone, completely proper. His blue eyes held her steadily. "Show them you have nothing to be ashamed of." It was reckless, potentially disastrous for her already tenuous position, yet something in his steady gaze gave her courage. "Very well," she said quietly. "One dance." He led her to the edge of the dancing area where couples were already moving to the music. With proper formality, he bowed slightly and offered his hand. Violet placed hers in it, allowing him to guide her into the dance. They moved together smoothly, maintaining an appropriate distance while following the steps of the simple country waltz. Violet was acutely aware of the stares, the whispers behind hands, but focused on the steady presence of Finn, his hand warm at her waist. "Everyone is watching," she murmured. "Let them," he replied. "We're doing nothing wrong." As the music continued, Violet gradually relaxed, allowing herself to enjoy the moment, the music, the warm summer evening, and the quiet strength of her partner. When the dance ended, Finn bowed properly and escorted her back to where Martha Jenkins stood beaming. "That was lovely," Martha said warmly. "You dance beautifully together." Violet opened her mouth to respond, but her words died as she saw Mrs. Whittaker approaching, her expression thunderous. "Miss Kensington," the school board representative said icily. "A word, if you please." Finn stepped forward. "Mrs. Whittaker, if this is about our dance, this is between Miss Kensington and myself, Mr. Xavier." Mrs. Whittaker's tone brooked no argument. "School business." Violet followed Mrs. Whittaker to a quiet spot near the church, her heart sinking. "I warned you about propriety," the older woman began without preamble. "Yet here you are, making a spectacle of yourself with Finn Xavier, of all people." "It was one dance, Mrs. Whittaker, completely proper." "Nothing is completely proper when it involves a woman of questionable reputation and a man like Xavier." Mrs. Whittaker's voice was cold. "Did you think we wouldn't discover the truth about your hasty departure from St. Louis? Or about Xavier's past?" Violet felt the blood drain from her face. "What do you mean?" "The Mercers received a letter from their cousin in St. Louis last week. He was most informative about the scandal involving you and a married school administrator." Mrs. Whittaker's eyes narrowed. "As for Xavier, his background has always been suspiciously vague. A former Union officer with no family connections out west. Very convenient." "Mr. Xavier fought honorably for the Union," Violet defended, trying to regain her composure. "And whatever you've heard about me is apparently true, judging by your reaction." Mrs. Whittaker's expression hardened. "The school board meets tomorrow evening. I suggest you prepare yourself for the possibility that your services may no longer be required in Platteville." As Mrs. Whittaker walked away, Violet stood frozen, the sounds of celebration continuing around her while her carefully constructed new life crumbled. She hadn't been naive enough to think her past would never surface, but she'd hoped for more time to prove herself, to establish her character through actions rather than rumors. Gathering her shawl around her shoulders, she slipped away from the celebration, unable to face the curious stares and whispered comments that would surely follow Mrs. Whittaker's public censure. The walk back to the schoolhouse seemed endless. each step carrying her closer to what felt like inevitable defeat. In her small room, Violet sank onto the edge of her bed, finally allowing the tears she'd been holding back. Tomorrow, the school board would likely dismiss her, and once again she would be forced to flee to start over somewhere even more remote, carrying the weight of another failure. A soft knock at the door downstairs startled her. Wiping her eyes, she descended the stairs, wondering who would seek her out after the scene at the celebration. When she opened the door, Finn stood on the threshold, concern etched on his features. "Are you all right? You disappeared from the celebration." "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. "It will only make things worse." "I saw Mrs. Whittaker speak to you. What did she say?" Violet shook her head, stepping back. "Please go, I can't afford any more scandal." Instead of leaving, Finn stepped forward, his expression grave. "The rumors from St. Louis have reached Platteville, haven't they?" "Yes." Violet wrapped her arms around herself. "The Mercers received a letter. By tomorrow, everyone will know." "Know what exactly?" His voice was gentle, without judgment. "What really happened in St. Louis, Violet?" Perhaps it was the quiet compassion in his voice, or simply the weight of carrying her secret alone for so long, but Violet found herself speaking. "I was teaching at a prestigious girls' school. The headmaster. He took an interest in me." She swallowed hard. "I was flattered at first. He was respected, educated, and seemed to value my ideas about teaching. I didn't know he was married until it was too late." "Too late?" Finn's expression remained carefully neutral. "Not in the way you might think." Violet's voice strengthened. "When I discovered he had a wife, I immediately ended any personal association, but he became persistent. When I continued to refuse his advances, he began to spread rumors that I had been the one pursuing him, that I had behaved inappropriately." She moved to the window, looking out at the darkened street. His wife believed him, of course. So did the school board. No one questioned why a respected headmaster would be interested in a young teacher unless she had somehow invited his attention. "I was dismissed without references, my reputation in ruins. And you came to Platteville to escape. It wasn't a question." Mrs. Whittaker's brother was a teacher at another school in St. Louis. He knew enough of the situation to doubt the official story. Violet turned back to face Finn. "He arranged the position here where no one knew me." "Until now." Finn's expression had darkened. "These rumors, they're false, but they've followed you anyway. The truth hardly matters once people believe the worst." Violet attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The school board meets tomorrow. I expect they'll ask for my resignation." Finn stepped closer. "Fight it. Tell them your side of the story. Who would believe me over the respected Mrs. Mercer and Mrs. Whittaker? I'm an outsider with a questionable past." "I believe you," Finn said firmly. "So would the Jenkins and others who have seen your character these past months. You're an excellent teacher who's done nothing wrong." His faith in her brought fresh tears to Violet's eyes. "Thank you for that. But even if I wanted to stay and fight, Mrs. Whittaker mentioned something about your past as well. I won't have you drawn into this." A shadow crossed Finn's face. "My past? What could she possibly—" He stopped abruptly, understanding dawning. "Ah, I think I know what she meant." "You don't have to explain," Violet said quickly. "But I want to." Finn ran a hand through his hair. "If they're using my friendship with you as another strike against your character, you deserve to know what they might say." He moved to the schoolroom's small stove, needlessly adjusting the damper. "After the war, I returned home to Massachusetts. My father had died, leaving considerable debts. I had to sell our family home to settle them." His voice grew distant. "Among my father's papers, I found evidence that he'd been involved in some questionable business dealings, nothing illegal, but ethically dubious." Finn turned back to face her. I used what remained of our family money to make restitution to those my father had taken advantage of. It caused a minor scandal in Boston society. Some called me honorable, others said I was disgracing my father's memory. Either way, there was nothing left for me there. So you came west to start over, Violet said softly, just as I did. Yes. Though my scandal was considerably less damaging than what you faced. He stepped closer. Violet, don't let them drive you away, not when you've done nothing wrong. The compassion in his eyes nearly undid her. For months, she'd maintained careful distance, convincing herself that friendship, let alone anything deeper, was a luxury she couldn't afford. Yet here he stood, offering understanding when she most needed it. Even if I wanted to stay and fight, she said, I'm not sure how. The school board holds all the power. Not all of it. Determination hardened Finn's features. The Jenkins have influence with the farming families. Sheriff Mills respects my opinion, and the children, they adore you. Their parents have seen the difference you've made. You make it sound so simple. Not simple. His smile was wry, but worth fighting for. You've built something here, Violet. Don't let gossip take it away. Their eyes held for a long moment. Violet felt something shift between them, the careful boundaries she'd maintained beginning to crumble under the weight of shared confidences and mutual understanding. It's late, she said finally. You should go before someone sees you here. Finn nodded, though reluctance was clear in his expression. Will you at least consider what I've said? About staying and fighting? I'll think about it, she promised, knowing that his presence in Platteville was becoming a powerful reason to stay despite the risks. After he left, Violet returned to her room and opened her dresser drawer, removing the photograph she'd kept hidden since her arrival. A young woman smiled back at her sister, Catherine, who had died of fever 3 years earlier. It had been Catherine's dream to teach, a dream cut short by illness. Violet had pursued teaching in her memory, determined that her sister's passion would live on through her. What would you do, Katie? She whispered to the image. Would you run again or stand your ground? The photograph offered no answers, but as Violet prepared for bed, she felt a resolve beginning to form. Perhaps Finn was right. Perhaps some things were worth fighting for, even against seemingly impossible odds. The school board meeting was scheduled for 7 o'clock the following evening in the church meeting room. All day, Violet moved through her normal routine with a sense of unreality, teaching her classes while acutely aware of the whispers among the older students and the curious glances from those who had come to collect their children. By 6:30, dressed in her most professional attire, a high-necked navy dress with modest trim, Violet made her way toward the church. She had spent a sleepless night considering her options and had reached a decision. She would not resign. If the board wished to dismiss her, they would have to do so formally, and she would defend herself as best she could. As she approached the church, Violet was surprised to see a crowd gathered outside. Parents from her school stood in small groups, talking earnestly. Among them were Martha and Elijah Jenkins, Sheriff Mills, and even old Dr. Peterson, who rarely attended public gatherings anymore. When they saw her, Martha hurried over. "Miss Kensington, we've been waiting for you." "What's happening?" Violet asked, bewildered by the unexpected turnout. "Word got around about the meeting tonight," Elijah explained. "Seems lots of folks have opinions about our schoolteacher." Violet's heart sank. "I see. Not like that," Martha said quickly. "These are parents of your students here to support you." Before Violet could respond, Mrs. Whittaker emerged from the church, looking displeased by the gathering. "The board meeting will begin shortly. This is a closed session." "Begging your pardon, Mrs. Whittaker," Sheriff Mills stepped forward. But as I understand it, school board meetings are open to taxpayers, and as the sheriff, I have a particular interest in community matters. This is a personnel issue, Mrs. Whittaker insisted, private and delicate. All the more reason those of us with children in the school should have a say, Martha countered, since it affects our families directly. Mrs. Whittaker's lips thinned to a disapproving line, but she could hardly turn away half the town without causing a greater scene. Very well. But only those with legitimate business may speak. As the crowd filed into the meeting room, Violet searched for Finn, surprised and a little hurt that he wasn't present. Had he changed his mind about supporting her? Inside, the 5 school board members sat at a table at the front of the room. Mrs. Whittaker, Mr. Mercer the banker, Pastor Johnson, Dr. Peterson, and Mr. Collins the blacksmith. The townspeople filled the chairs arranged for the meeting, with some standing along the walls. Mrs. Whittaker called the meeting to order with obvious reluctance. "We are here to discuss a matter concerning our school teacher, Miss Kensington. Information has come to light regarding her previous position and the circumstances of her departure from St. Louis." Violet stood, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Mrs. Whittaker, if I may, the board will speak first," Mrs. Whittaker interrupted. "Mrs. Mercer has received correspondence from her cousin in St. Louis detailing a most concerning situation. Miss Kensington was dismissed from her position at the Radcliffe School for young ladies following inappropriate relations with the married headmaster." A murmur went through the crowd. Violet felt her cheeks burn with humiliation, but she held her ground. "This board cannot in good conscience allow someone of questionable moral character to continue teaching our children," Mrs. Whittaker continued. "Additionally, Miss Kensington has been observed in familiar association with Mr. Finn Xavier, a man whose own background bears scrutiny." At this, Sheriff Mills stood. "I'd like to know what exactly you're implying about Finn Xavier, madam. He's been a respected rancher in this community for 5 years. Mr. Xavier's personal history in Boston raises questions about his judgment and character," Mrs. Whittaker replied. "His association with Miss Kensington only confirms our concerns about her discernment." The door at the back of the room opened, and Finn himself entered, accompanied by a distinguished older gentleman in a well-tailored suit. The crowd parted as they made their way to the front. "My apologies for the late arrival," Finn said, his voice carrying through the room. "The Denver train was delayed. May I introduce Mr. Howard Reynolds, attorney at law from Denver and former school superintendent of Cook County, Illinois." Mrs. Whittaker's face paled slightly. "This is a local matter, Mr. Xavier. Outside interference is not welcome." "On the contrary," Mr. Reynolds stepped forward, his bearing authoritative. "When a qualified teacher faces dismissal based on hearsay and gossip rather than factual evidence, it becomes a matter of legal and educational interest." He turned to address the room at large. "At Mr. Xavier's request, I have spent the past month investigating the circumstances of Miss Kensington's departure from St. Louis. I have here sworn affidavits from 3 teachers at the Radcliffe School testifying to the headmaster's pattern of inappropriate behavior toward female staff." Violet stared at Finn in shock. He had been investigating on her behalf for weeks, long before she'd confided in him. Mr. Reynolds continued, "I also have correspondence from 2 school board members who now regret their hasty judgment in the matter. The headmaster in question, Mr. James Harrington, has since been removed from his position following similar complaints from other teachers." He placed a folder on the table before the board members. "These documents clearly demonstrate that Miss Kensington was the victim, not the instigator, of impropriety. Her only crime was refusing the advances of a powerful man who then used his position to punish her. The room had fallen completely silent. Violet felt tears threatening but blinked them back, determined to maintain her dignity. Martha Jenkins stood next. Even without these fancy papers from Denver, those of us with children in the school know Miss Kensington's character. My Tommy couldn't read a word when she arrived. Now he devours every book he can find. Sarah's arithmetic has improved so much she helps me with the farm accounts. Other parents began to speak up, one after another, describing improvements in their children's education, Violet's dedication, her propriety and kindness. Even Dr. Peterson, the elderly board member who had remained silent until now, cleared his throat. "I've watched Miss Kensington these past months," he said. "Reminds me of my late wife. She taught school 40 years. Same dedication, same patience. We'd be fools to lose such a teacher over gossip." Mrs. Whitaker, clearly sensing the tide turning against her, tried one last approach. "And what of her inappropriate relationship with Mr. Xavier? Even if we accept this new information about St. Louis, her behavior here has raised eyebrows." At this, Finn stepped forward. "If you're referring to one proper dance at a public celebration, I fail to see the impropriety. Unless you're suggesting that any unmarried woman who speaks to me is somehow compromised. Your reputation," Mrs. Whitaker began. "My reputation," Finn interrupted, "is built on 5 years of honest work and fair dealing in this community. Yes, I made enemies in Boston when I chose to right my father's wrongs rather than protect the family name. I'm not ashamed of that choice, nor will I apologize for it." He looked directly at Violet, something warm and certain in his gaze. "As for my friendship with Miss Kensington, it is based on mutual respect and shared values. If the board considers that inappropriate, perhaps they should examine their own prejudices." Pastor Johnson, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. "I believe we've heard enough. This meeting was called hastily, based on information that appears incomplete at best and malicious at worst." He looked at his fellow board members. "I move that we formally affirm Miss Kensington's position and extend her contract for the coming year." Mr. Collins, the blacksmith, seconded the motion. When the vote was called, only Mrs. Whitaker opposed, with Mr. Mercer abstaining and the other 3 in favor. "Motion carried," Pastor Johnson announced. "Miss Kensington will continue as Platteville's schoolteacher." The room erupted in approving murmurs and relieved smiles. Martha Jenkins hugged Violet impulsively, while others came forward to offer congratulations and support. Through it all, Violet's gaze kept returning to Finn, who stood quietly at the edge of the celebration, his eyes never leaving her face. When the crowd finally began to disperse, he made his way to her side. "You went to Denver," she said softly. "You were investigating all this time." "I've seen how this town treats outsiders," he replied. "The moment I heard whispers about your past, I knew you might need evidence to counter the gossip." "Why would you do that for me?" His expression softened. "I think you know why, Violet." The simple statement hung between them, laden with meaning neither was quite ready to voice aloud. Before she could respond, Mr. Reynolds approached to take his leave. "Miss Kensington," the attorney said, "I hope you'll accept my apologies for the intrusion into your private affairs." Mr. Xavier was most insistent that justice be done. "I'm grateful, Mr. Reynolds, truly." After he departed, Violet found herself walking beside Finn in the cool evening air, the excitement of the meeting gradually fading as they moved away from the church. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you continue teaching, without the shadow of false accusations hanging over you." Finn's voice was gentle. "The truth is out. Even Mrs. Whitaker and the Mercers will have to accept it eventually." They paused at the corner where they would need to part ways, Finn toward the road leading to his ranch, Violet toward the schoolhouse. "And what about us?" Violet asked, finding courage in the darkness and the lingering adrenaline of victory. "You said the town would judge our friendship. That hasn't changed. Perhaps not immediately." Finn turned to face her fully. "But opinions can change over time. People might eventually accept that a schoolteacher and a rancher could have a proper courtship." The word courtship sent a flutter through Violet's chest. "Is that what you want?" "What I want," Finn said carefully, "is to know you better, Violet Kensington, without secrets or fears or the judgment of others standing between us. I want the chance to see if what I already feel for you might grow into something even stronger." He took her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "I won't rush you. I know you've had more than enough upheaval for one day, but when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." Violet looked up at him, this man who had fought for her when no one else would, who had believed her story and sought proof to vindicate her. In his eyes, she saw not judgment but something she had almost forgotten existed: hope. "I'm not used to having someone on my side," she admitted softly. "Get used to it." His smile was tender in the moonlight. "Whether as a friend or something more, I'm on your side, Violet. For as long as you'll have me." The promise in those words warmed her more than any declaration of love could have. This was a beginning, tentative, perhaps, but real. Not a fairy tale ending, but something better. The honest start of something that might, with care and time, grow into lasting happiness. "Walk me home tomorrow after school," she asked, her voice steady despite the fluttering of her heart. "We could discuss poetry, or cattle, or anything, really." His smile widened. "I'd like that very much." With a gentle squeeze of her hand, he released her and stepped back. "Good night, Violet. Sleep well." "Good night, Finn." As she watched him walk away, Violet felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of secrecy and shame that had followed her from St. Louis was finally lifting. For the first time since arriving in Platteville, she felt not like an outsider on borrowed time, but like a woman who might, just possibly, have found her place in the world. The weeks following the school board meeting brought subtle but significant changes to Violet's life in Platteville. The most vicious gossip subsided, replaced by a cautious acceptance from most of the community. Mrs. Whitaker maintained a cool distance, and Lydia Mercer still sniffed disapprovingly when they passed on the street, but their power to harm had been considerably diminished. More surprising was the newfound respect Violet received from many townspeople. Parents who had previously been cordial but reserved now greeted her warmly, stopping to discuss their children's progress or invite her to Sunday dinner. Even Pastor Johnson's wife, previously so aloof, asked Violet to help with the church's Harvest Festival planning committee. Through it all, Finn was a steady presence. True to his word, he walked Violet home after school several times a week, their conversations ranging from literature to ranching to their shared experiences as outsiders who had found refuge in the West. Sometimes they strolled through town in full view of curious onlookers. Other times they took the longer path along Miller's Creek, where cottonwood trees provided shade and privacy for more personal discussions. "My sister wants to visit next spring," Finn mentioned one golden September afternoon as they sat on a fallen log beside the creek. "She's curious about the ranch and about you." "You've written to her about me?" Violet asked, surprised. "Of course." His smile was warm. "Elizabeth is my only family. We share everything important." The casual acknowledgement that she was important to him sent a pleasant warmth through Violet. Over the past weeks, their friendship had deepened into something more, though both were careful to maintain propriety in public. "I'd like to meet her," Violet said, "though I'm not sure what she'll think of me." "She'll adore you." Finn reached for her hand, a gesture that had become comfortable between them. Elizabeth has never cared for social pretensions. She married a professor with radical ideas and no family connections, much to our father's dismay. As the September days shortened into October, Violet found herself looking forward to these quiet moments with Finn more than anything else. His steady presence, his unwavering support, and his genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings were unlike anything she had experienced before. One crisp Saturday, in late October, Finn invited her to ride out to the Broken Spur Ranch. "The aspens are turning gold in the foothills," he said. "It's quite a sight. Martha Jenkins has agreed to chaperone, if you're concerned about appearances." The ride to the ranch took them through rolling grasslands that gave way to more rugged terrain as they approached the foothills. Martha rode slightly ahead with Elijah, giving Violet and Finn some privacy while maintaining propriety. The Broken Spur sat nestled against the backdrop of the mountains, a sturdy main house, barn, bunkhouse, and corrals spread across a picturesque valley. Cattle grazed on the surrounding grasslands while horses watched curiously from a nearby paddock. "It's beautiful," Violet said as they crested the final rise. "You've built all this in 5 years. Started with almost nothing," Finn admitted. "A run-down cabin, a few hundred acres, and more determination than sense. The first winter nearly broke me." As they dismounted in the ranch yard, a gray-haired man emerged from the barn. "Boss, didn't expect you back so early." "Just showing Miss Kensington the place, Charlie," Finn replied. "This is Charlie Winters, my foreman and the man who taught me everything I know about ranching." Charlie tipped his hat to Violet. "Madam, heard a lot about you from the boss here." "All good things, I hope," Violet said with a smile. "Ain't heard him talk about much else lately," Charlie replied with a wink that made Violet blush and Finn clear his throat. After touring the ranch buildings, Finn led the small group up a trail that wound into the hills behind the house. The path climbed steadily through stands of aspen trees, their leaves a brilliant gold against the clear blue sky. At a small clearing near a rocky outcropping, they stopped to rest the horses. "This is my favorite spot on the entire ranch," Finn said as he helped Violet dismount. "Especially in autumn." The view was spectacular, the ranch buildings below, the vast expanse of the plains beyond, and the distant outline of Platteville just visible on the horizon. The late afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light, while a gentle breeze sent aspen leaves fluttering to the ground around them. Martha and Elijah tactfully moved to explore a nearby grove, giving Finn and Violet a moment alone. "I come up here sometimes to think," Finn said, standing close beside her at the edge of the outcropping. "When I first arrived in Colorado, lost and angry after the war and the situation in Boston, this view helped me find perspective." Violet understood completely. "It makes our problems seem smaller, doesn't it, against all this vastness? Yet somehow more meaningful too." Finn turned to face her. "Violet, I brought you here today for a reason. I wanted you to see this place, not just the ranch, but this particular spot, because it matters to me. And because you matter to me more than I ever expected anyone could." The earnestness in his voice made her heart quicken. "Finn, please, let me finish." He took both her hands in his. "I know it hasn't been long, and I promise not to rush you. But these past months have shown me what kind of woman you are: brave, principled, resilient. The way you fought for your place here, the way you care for your students, the way you've opened your heart to me despite every reason to be cautious." He paused, drawing a deep breath. "I love you, Violet. I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you at that schoolhouse window your first day in Platteville." The declaration, so simply stated yet so profound, brought tears to Violet's eyes. even when the town called me damaged goods, especially then. His voice roughened with emotion, because I saw what they couldn't or wouldn't see, not damage but strength, not a woman to be judged but one to be treasured. His thumb gently wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. You are the most precious find of my life, Violet Kensington. With those words, the last of her carefully maintained defenses crumbled. I love you too, she whispered. I've been afraid to admit it, even to myself. After everything that happened in St. Louis, I didn't trust my own judgment, let alone anyone else's intentions. And now? His eyes searched hers, hopeful yet patient. Now I know what real respect looks like, what it feels like to be valued for who I am, not what someone wants from me. She squeezed his hands. You never once made me feel like I needed to be anything other than myself. Finn's smile was radiant. That's because who you are is exactly who I love. He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small object that caught the late afternoon sunlight. I have my grandmother's ring here. It's not grand or fancy, just a simple gold band with a small sapphire. But it carries the weight of a good marriage that lasted 50 years through every kind of hardship. Violet's breath caught as he held it up between them. I'm not asking you to answer today, Finn said quickly. I know this is sudden and you might need time. I just wanted you to know my intentions are serious. And when you're ready, if you ever feel ready, I want to build a life with you. Here, at the Broken Spur, or in town if you prefer to continue teaching, or anywhere else you want to go. Tears flowed freely down Violet's cheeks now, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. Ask me properly, Finn Xavier, she said softly. Ask me now. His eyes widened, then crinkled with happiness as he lowered himself to one knee before her, still holding her hand. Violet Kensington, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my heart's companion for all our days? Yes, she answered without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as though meant to be there, Finn rose and drew her gently into his arms. Their first kiss was tender, a promise sealed beneath the golden aspens with the vast Colorado sky as witness. When they finally drew apart, breathless and smiling, the sound of applause broke the stillness. Martha and Elijah Jenkins stood at the edge of the clearing, beaming at the newly engaged couple. About time, Elijah called, his weathered face creased with delight. Charlie owes me $2. I said you'd propose before the first snow. Martha hurried forward to embrace Violet. I'm so happy for you both, she said, tears in her eyes. You deserve every happiness. Thank you, Violet said, emotion making her voice unsteady. For everything, your friendship, your support when I needed it most. That's what neighbors do, Martha said simply. And now we'll be family of sorts, with you just over the ridge at the Broken Spur. As they rode back down to the ranch house, the sun beginning to set behind the mountains, Violet felt a sense of completion she had never expected to find. 6 months ago, she had stepped off the train in Platteville with nothing but a carpet bag and desperate hope. Now she had not only salvaged her reputation and career, but found love with a man who saw her true worth. Later, as they said goodbye at the schoolhouse door, Finn kissed her once more, properly brief, but with a promise of deeper passion to come. When shall we announce it? He asked, reluctant to leave her. Sunday after church, Violet suggested. Most of the town will be there. Including Mrs. Whittaker and Mrs. Mercer, Finn noted with a wry smile. Their expressions alone will be worth the wait. Violet laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. Let them talk, I don't care anymore. That's my brave Violet. Finn touched the ring on her finger, now hidden beneath her glove. 2 more days and then no more hiding what we feel. As she watched him ride away in the gathering dusk, Violet felt not the familiar weight of judgment but the buoyant certainty of being truly, completely loved. The town might have called her damaged goods, but Finn Xavier had seen her worth from the beginning. In his eyes, she was and would always be the most precious find, a treasure beyond price, a woman worthy of respect, admiration, and enduring love. Their wedding took place on a crisp November morning with the first dusting of snow on the distant peaks. The small church in Platteville was filled to capacity not just with the curious, but with genuine well-wishers who had come to respect both the schoolteacher and the rancher who had fought for her. Martha Jenkins had helped Violet create a simple but elegant wedding dress of ivory satin with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. A small wreath of dried autumn flowers crowned her chestnut hair, which fell in loose curls down her back rather than in her usual severe schoolteacher's bun. Finn waited at the altar in a new black suit, his expression transforming from nervous anticipation to awe as Violet walked down the aisle on Sheriff Mill's arm. The older man had kindly offered to give her away in the absence of any family. "Dearly beloved," Pastor Johnson began, his voice carrying through the hushed church, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When Finn slipped the gold band beside her engagement ring and spoke his vows to love, honor, and cherish her all the days of his life, Violet felt the last shadows of her painful past finally fade away. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the pastor concluded. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Their first kiss as a married couple was met with applause and a few happy tears from the congregation. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors, Violet caught sight of Mrs. Whittaker in the third row. The older woman's expression was unreadable for a moment, then softened into something that, if not quite approval, was at least acceptance. The celebration continued at the Jenkins farm, where tables had been set up in the barn, decorated with autumn leaves and late-blooming wildflowers. The entire community contributed to the feast: Martha's famous fried chicken, Mrs. Peterson's apple pies, and even a wedding cake from the hotel restaurant in town. Charlie Winters and the ranch hands played lively music for dancing, and Finn proudly led his bride in their first dance as husband and wife, no longer concerned about propriety or gossip, but reveling in their newfound status. "Happy, Mrs. Xavier?" Finn murmured as they moved together. "Perfectly," Violet replied, her eyes shining. "Though the children at school may have trouble with the name change, you're still teaching then. Until spring, at least. I promised the school board a full year." She smiled up at him. "After that, we'll see. Perhaps I'll divide my time between teaching and helping at the ranch." As the celebration continued around them, Finn led Violet outside for a moment of quiet. The November air was crisp, but not yet bitter, the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. "A wedding gift." He handed her a small package wrapped in silk. Inside was a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. "It's beautiful," Violet breathed, opening the clasp to find it empty. "For keepsakes, I thought." Finn hesitated. "I noticed the photograph you keep of your sister, you told me. I thought perhaps you might want to carry her with you." The thoughtfulness of the gift, his understanding of how much Catherine's memory meant to her, brought tears to Violet's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's perfect." Later that night, as their wedding guests bid them farewell with good-natured teasing and blessings, Finn helped Violet into the wagon that would take them to the broken spur to their home. Her few possessions had already been moved from the schoolhouse to the ranch, Martha and the other women having helped prepare the house while Finn and Violet exchanged their vows. The ride to the ranch was quiet, both of them wrapped in the intimacy of their new status and the anticipation of the night to come. When they arrived, Finn surprised her by lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier," he said, setting her gently on her feet in the main room. The house had been transformed, fresh curtains at the windows, a new quilt on the bed visible through the bedroom door, and a cheerful fire in the hearth. On the table, Martha had left a cold supper and a bottle of wine for the newlyweds. "It's wonderful," Violet said, taking in the cozy space that would be their home. "Though I suspect Martha and her friends had something to do with these touches," Finn grinned. "They insisted," said a bachelor's cabin needed a woman's touch before it could properly be called a home. They shared the simple meal by firelight, talking softly about the wedding, their plans for the ranch, and the future stretching before them, a future neither had dared imagine 6 months earlier. When they finally retired to the bedroom, any lingering nervousness Violet felt dissolved in the tenderness of Finn's touch and the depth of his love for her. Their first night together as husband and wife was everything she had hoped for, passionate yet gentle, a physical expression of the emotional bond that had grown between them since that first meeting on Platteville's dusty street. Afterward, lying in his arms with the moonlight filtering through the window, Violet felt a profound sense of peace. "What are you thinking?" Finn asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I never expected to find this kind of happiness," she admitted. "When I arrived in Platteville, all I wanted was to be left alone to rebuild my life. I certainly wasn't looking for love. Nor was I." Finn pressed a kiss to her forehead. "But sometimes the best gifts are the ones we aren't looking for. Like a stubbornly honorable rancher who believed in me when no one else would," Violet smiled against his chest, "or a brave, beautiful schoolteacher who saw past my gruff exterior to the man beneath." He tightened his arms around her. "We're a matched pair, Violet Xavier. Two outsiders who found home in each other." As winter settled over Colorado, the newlyweds established their routine. Violet continued teaching during the week, with Finn driving her to and from town in the wagon or sleigh when the weather allowed. Weekends were spent at the ranch, where Violet gradually transformed the bachelor's cabin into a true home. They celebrated Christmas quietly, with a small tree cut from their own land and simple gifts exchanged by firelight. Finn gave Violet a set of beautifully bound classics to start their home library. She presented him with a handsome new saddle blanket she had worked on secretly for weeks. The new year brought heavy snows that occasionally made the journey to town impossible. On those days, Violet remained at the ranch, discovering unexpected joy in domestic tasks she had once viewed as mere necessity. She learned to make soap and candles, to preserve meat and vegetables, and to bake bread in the temperamental ranch oven. By early spring, as the snow began to melt and the first green appeared on the plains, Violet had news of her own. "Finn," she said one evening as they sat by the fire after supper, "I need to tell you something." He looked up from the ranching ledger he'd been reviewing, concern immediately crossing his features. "What is it? Are you unwell?" "Not unwell, no." She took his hand, placing it gently against her still flat stomach. "But I won't be returning to the schoolroom next fall, at least not right away." For a moment he looked puzzled, then understanding dawned in his eyes. "Violet, are you?" "Yes." Her smile was radiant. "Dr. Peterson confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a baby, probably late September." Joy transformed Finn's face as he gathered her into his arms, holding her as though she were made of precious glass. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our child." The months that followed were filled with preparations. Violet completed the school year without revealing her condition. though Martha Jenkins guessed early on, and became her confidante and advisor on all matters of motherhood. Finn threw himself into preparing the ranch, expanding their small house to include a proper nursery, hiring an additional hand to help with the cattle so he could spend more time at home, and watching over Violet with a protectiveness that would have been stifling if it weren't so endearing. Word of the impending arrival spread through Platteville, bringing a wave of goodwill that surprised Violet. Women who had once whispered behind her back now visited with gifts of baby clothes and practical advice. Even Mrs. Whittaker, unbent enough to present a handmade christening gown, explaining stiffly that she had made similar ones for all Platteville's teachers' children over the years. As summer faded into autumn and Violet's time drew near, Finn's sister Elizabeth arrived from Boston, determined to be present for the birth of her first niece or nephew. The two women formed an immediate bond, with Elizabeth's forthright manner and intelligence reminding Violet of her lost sister Catherine. "My brother has excellent taste," Elizabeth declared after their first long conversation. "I worried when he fled west after the Boston debacle, but it seems he found exactly what he needed here." "We both did," Violet replied, resting a hand on her swollen abdomen. "Second chances aren't always easy to come by." The baby arrived on a golden September afternoon, as the aspens were just beginning to turn in the foothills behind the ranch. After a difficult but ultimately uncomplicated labor, with Martha Jenkins and Elizabeth attending alongside the midwife, Violet gave birth to a healthy son with a shock of dark hair and his father's blue eyes. When Finn was finally allowed into the bedroom, his face pale with worry after hours of pacing the ranch yard, he approached the bed with reverence. "Meet your son," Violet said softly, shifting the blanket to reveal the tiny face. Finn's expression as he beheld his child for the first time was something Violet knew she would remember for the rest of her life. Wonder, love, and fierce protectiveness all mingled together. "He's perfect," he whispered, carefully sitting on the edge of the bed and extending a tentative finger to stroke the baby's cheek. "Just like his mother. They named him Samuel Finn Xavier after Finn's father and himself. A chance to redeem the name," Finn explained. "To give it a fresh start, just as we had." As autumn deepened into winter, the little family settled into their new reality. Finn proved to be a devoted father, proudly showing off his son to the ranch hands and spending hours simply watching the baby sleep. Violet discovered that motherhood, while challenging, brought a fulfillment she hadn't known was missing from her life. Elizabeth returned to Boston before the heavy snows, promising to visit again in the spring, and extracting a promise that they would bring Samuel east to meet his extended family when he was a bit older. Christmas that year was especially joyous, with 3-month-old Samuel too young to understand the holiday but providing its central delight nonetheless. The Jenkins family and Charlie Winters joined them for Christmas dinner, filling the expanded ranch house with warmth and laughter. As the new year of 1878 began, Violet sat in the rocking chair by the nursery window, Samuel sleeping peacefully in her arms. Finn found her there, gazing out at the snow-covered landscape with a contented smile. "Happy?" he asked softly, coming to stand behind her and placing his hands on her shoulders. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. "When I arrived in Platteville 2 years ago, I was so certain my life was ruined. All I hoped for was a quiet existence free from scandal. And instead," she looked up at him, love warming her voice, "instead I found everything I never dared dream of: respect, purpose, love, family." Her gaze returned to their sleeping son. "Sometimes I wonder if I deserve so much happiness after everything that happened." You deserve all of it and more, Finn said firmly, leaning down to kiss her forehead. We've both traveled difficult paths to reach this place. Perhaps that's why we can appreciate it so fully. As Samuel stirred and opened his eyes so like his father's, Violet felt the last lingering shadows of her past finally dissolve completely. Here in this home she had built with Finn, with their son in her arms and the future stretching bright before them, she was no longer the woman who had fled scandal and judgment. She was Violet Xavier, teacher, wife, mother, beloved. Not damaged goods, but the most precious find in a good man's life. And in finding her own worth reflected in his eyes, she had discovered the greatest treasure of all, the courage to love without fear and to live without shame, embracing all the joy that second chances could bring.